living as writers. I've had a hard time making a living as a writer here, and so in God's providence, I'm now in the radio business, where I can provide a great service to advertisers and make a very slight living doing that. But in Knoxville, there is a writer, blogger, a businessman, and a Republican activist and a former office holder in Knox County named Brian Hornback. And Brian Hornback is drawing revenues. He's drawing advertising revenues, covering the politics of the Republican and the Democratic parties, and then occasionally, I guess, people who are not in partisan races, but who draw his notice as editor and writer at brianhornback.com. He's 49 years old. He and his wife, Rachel, have 3 children, and he's been for 24 years in the grocery food sales business. And for him, well, politics is like you're my listener's golf game. You play golf, and he writes about politics at brianhornback.com, which has been a website, a blog website for about 10 years now. Brian, welcome to our show.
Thank you, David. Thanks for allowing me to be on here today. It's a great honor, and I couldn't have asked for a better introduction than what you just gave me.
Well, we like to see the media expanding its service to the public, and you have a very large public, it seems, given the fact that your website offers monthly rates for advertisers, and that many of the people who advertise with you are congressmen and commissioners and people looking for positions as assessor of property and the like, and they advertise with you because they know what do they know about your website? You, the writer of this of brianhornback.com. What do they know?
What they know is they know that I have a large readership. And the readership is extensive, and it continues to grow. And I think that's partly due to the fact that a lot of the mainstream news sources have gone behind paywalls. And the fact of the matter is, whatever I choose to write about, or whatever David Tulis chooses to write about, we're doing this as a passion. We're doing it as a hobby. At the same time, we're informing the masses, and that's something that the mainstream media has really just tried to make money on. And granted, they've got to make money in order to pay their reporters, but at the same time, they're charging for news, but they're not giving any in-depth reporting. And that's one of the things that I've tried to make brianhornback.com a little bit different about. Is that a lot of times I'll find a story in the mainstream Knoxville media or East Tennessee media, and it doesn't really give the backstory. It doesn't open up the door to truly shine the light on the story. And I'm fortunate enough, because I've been active politically for 30-some years in East Tennessee, that I've got the sources that I can sometimes lift the rug up and kind of show some of the dust particles that exist within the story that the mainstream media just doesn't have the time, energy, or want to get into.
Well, can you give an example of a story that's come out recently in which you do lift up that corner of the carpet and look under?
Sure. The Knox County Mayor, Tim Burchett, had some property, had a garage over in a certain area of Knox County, and discovered that he was leasing it out to a lady to run a weekend antique junk flea market type operation. It's a garage that didn't have public restrooms and didn't have a certificate of occupancy, so there was no assurance that the public was safe when they went there. They had several festivals where they had food trucks there, and if that had been Brian Hornback, I'm sure I would have been shut down a lot quicker. That business operated from May until October when I exposed the fact that there was no certificate of occupancy. And they have applied for a certificate of occupancy immediately upon the report that I filed that I posted on November the 4th. But since then, within the last week, the county mayor has sold that property for $450,000 to an LLC. And so there'll be more to come on that story. But that's a story that I broke, that the Knoxville News Sentinel followed up on, And there's other stories like that, but that's the most recent example.
Well, now, how do you manage to do your writing? The listener wants to know, okay, he's a businessman, and yet he seems to be very connected and going to meetings and calling people and meeting people for coffee in restaurants and there at the little market mall in downtown. How do you do that? Is your job in the grocery food sales business full time, or are you somehow half time and then do half time on your website and blog?
No, it's clearly, as you alluded to in the introduction, it is. I do work full time, and most of my writing happens basically at night, and on weekends. Occasionally I'll be able to have a cell phone conversation with someone during the day that kind of plants a seed of something, and then I'm able through email and to request documentation. But as far as putting all my stories together, publishing my stories, unless it's just a real quick something I can do on a break during the day, all that happens at night and on weekends.
How concerned are you and how careful are you, Brian Hornback, to present both sides of a story? That is the hallmark of the professional journalist. They'll maybe look down at you in the way you write, but it seems to me a good thing to have, you might say, the extension of grace in a story about a dispute between, let's say, two parties. You quote each party fairly and accurately and present each party's perspective in its best light. That seems to be, at least in theory, the way professional journalists run their newspapers and their television stations. Do you follow that rule too?
No, I'm very clear to tell people that I am a citizen journalist. I consider myself really to be more of a citizen opinion writer. I will make attempts to get both sides of a story, but if I feel passionately about a story, then I go ahead and run with it, and all under the caveat that this is what I base this on the information I have, and in no way would I ever hold myself up to be a reporter for any of the mainstream journalistic publications. It is purely a citizen journalist role, a citizen journalist editorial opinion.
So your reporting and your analysis and your editorializing, Brian, has an argument to make, and how can we summarize the argument theory? Are you say I'm writing for defense of taxpayers, or what is the ideal behind your practice?
Well, let's say, for example, the situation with the county mayor's property that was being rented for a business that didn't have a certificate of occupancy. I believe in that context, I was looking at it from the perspective of, if Brian Hornback goes out and opens up Brian Hornback consignment sales, then I would expect that as the owner of that building, as the owner of that business, that I'm going to familiarize myself with the ordinances and the rules within that governmental jurisdiction. I'm going to ensure that people who come to my business, A, have a bathroom and not a porta potty. I'm going to ensure that if one of those, if a handicapped individual comes, that they would have access to that building. And so in that context of that particular story, I came at it from the idea that as a business owner, would I want the county mayor being able to not follow the same rules and regulations that I am required to follow?
Well, when you wrote those stories, Brian, did you go out of your way to get comment from the man who was the object of the story?
I made numerous attempts to contact the county mayor through text messaging and phone calls, to which none of those were returned. But he did respond to the writer at the Knoxville News Sentinel, and so the only comments that I could attribute to the county mayor were through the comments that were published in the Knoxville News Sentinel, because the county mayor ignored numerous attempts at me, also through his communications director, give me any comment, and I have text messages to show that.
So what you're saying, Brian Hornback, is that officials won't deal with you as they would deal with a News Sentinel reporter, because somehow you're less. You're just a citizen journalist. You're just a blogger, and they need not pay attention to you. But because you have a lot of traffic among readers in Knox County, you can sustain your website, at least all the costs of running your website, with advertising, right? You charge $175 for a display ad on your website per month, and in election season you have quite a few of those.
Let's circle back to that one thing. It's kind of funny that these folks recognize the impact of BrianHornback.com when it's beneficial to them. They'll call me and say, "Hey, here's a story idea." But when it's a story that's unfavorable, they don't want to answer the call. But I do have numerous times where the county mayor and other elected officials have called me to talk about a story, or if it's a story that's not unfavorable, they will respond. So they do get attribution when they will talk to me about stories. It's only in the one instance that I've referred to today where it was not in the mayor's interest to necessarily respond to me that I didn't get a response. But yes, what happened was the website began in 2004. I started offering advertisements in 2013. So I operated from 2004 to 2013 without any revenue. And it was just basically my gift to the community if they chose to read it. And if they didn't, then, it was just me having a soapbox to be able to have my views known. In 2013, I did start offering advertising. And so, since February of 2013, I have been able to pay back a little bit of the cost of the operation of the website. But, clearly it's not something I'm going to retire on.
No, but your costs for running a website are virtually nil, but the cost you've earned probably several $1,000s a year since you started taking advertising. That covers not just the website, but your travel, your time, you're spending time in filing open records requests and meeting people and buying lunch for someone whom you want to interview. Those are all expenses connected with being a writer and a publisher. So you are making headway. You're making real headway as a publisher.
Right. I would agree with that.
Independent media.
And you're right. It's what people don't understand is they can start if they have a passion for something, no matter what that issue is. For me, it's political, government operations. But if your listeners out there have a passion for something, Google owns blogspot.com. You can go to blogger.com. You can go in and start your own blog tomorrow at no cost. And even when you buy a domain, and even when you host your content on your own server, the costs are minimal. And yes, in 2014, I made somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 in revenue. Again, it's nothing to retire on, but granted, it has gone from a negative ledger from 2004 to 2013 to somewhat of a positive ledger in the fact that there is now revenue and able to at least give something back for the time that I take to hopefully provide the citizens with something more than what they're currently getting in the marketplace.
Right. Revenue is a marketplace affirmation of what you're doing. Even though people may fault what you're doing, they'll come to look at it because it is controversial. It is hyper local. It's all about Knox County, Knoxville, and it's from someone who has many connections and which are valuable. And people know when they go to BrianHornback.com that they're getting an argument and a perspective. They're not being promised that it's so-called objective. And it is from a person who's involved in some of these activities, and he's espousing his take at any given moment on a particular actor or event. Let me ask you, Brian Hornback, about open records requests. You use that device quite a bit. Tell my listener in a nutshell what an open records request is and how it can empower him, the listener, to find out what's going on in his government.
Well, the great thing about open records requests, and when I started this blog and really started looking at open records requests, it was one of those situations where I didn't really know what I was getting into, and I had a friend of mine who was knowledgeable of the law, who drafted a template for me, and so when I decide that there's documents that I need to look at, then I use this template, and I just copy paste and I fill in what I need to fill in. And what happens is, particularly on the mayor's business or the mayor's previously owned property that had an illegal business operating out of it, I sent this open records request to the county asking for the certificate of occupancy. I got an instantaneous reply that there was no certificate of occupancy. And then I began to ask for the documents for the application. Within a couple of 3 days, applications were filed, and I had to make another request. And Knox County has been very, very cooperative in ensuring that those are not drug out. There's a period of time, 7 days, that they have to reply, and if they can't give it to you within 7 days, and they have to tell you when you can expect to receive it. And so, it could get drug out for 30, 45, 50 days, or an indefinite period of time, choosing on whether or not they really want to comply. The neighboring county in Loudoun County had an issue where it was very cost prohibitive for a citizen journalist to obtain some documents. And I believe you were at that meeting back in September, David, when some of that detail was hashed out. But not to get in depth on that, but it's been very beneficial to me. Only in the time that I've been requesting open records have I felt like I was being intentionally slow walked, and that was in mid-July of this year by the school system. And I was still able to get the information in a timely manner to report to my readers about an issue that pertained to a local election.
This is David Tulis. We're talking with Brian Hornback, who's a blogger of gaining note as an independent media provider, an independent reporter, and editorialist in Knox County. His website is brianhornback.com, which he's been operating since 2004. He started taking advertising in 2013. And like Chattanoogan.com here in Chattanooga, it provides a living for the operator, not in his case, not a rich living, but nonetheless covers all of his expenses and encourages him as money coming in is always an encouragement, a market signifier that the work is valuable. It's valued by people who advertise and read. And as a media personality in Knoxville, coming from behind, if you will, or coming from underneath, he's challenging the established reporting mechanisms in the local press, the Knoxville News Sentinel, and the television stations. Well, Brian, so you use open records requests, and you're gaining headway. And is there a story coming up do you have just real quickly here? Do you have any kind of stories that might be of interest to a Chattanooga reader, something that tells about the state in general, or is it only about Knoxville?
Well, things. I am getting a greater reach out of Knoxville now. I've had a candidate running for public office in Loudoun County, the county just south of Knox, that is advertising on brianhornback.com right now. And clearly, if there are stories that come to my mind that I decide I want to editorialize on, or I want to dig a little deeper, I'm always open to do that. That I'm following very closely the House Republican caucus. The legislature begins session next week, and on the 12th of January, the Tennessee Republican caucus are convening, and I believe one of your state legislators from Chattanooga, Representative Gerald McCormick, is in leadership with the House Republican caucus. They're meeting on whether or not the Tennessee whip, the Republican whip, Representative Jeremy Durham from Franklin, has had some legal issues, and also he offered a letter asking for a sentence leniency for a convicted child pornographer. And so the House caucus will be meeting behind closed doors on the 12th of January to determine the future of Mr. Durham in a position of as Republican whip. I'm following that story rather closely. Was able to get a response from all of the Knoxville area Republican legislators, with the exception of one. And so I was able to get 5 responses, and one legislator has refused to opine on how he intends to pursue
This is David Tulis. We're here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.